Adventure Ho Illumineers. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Archazia's Island, the set release that happened this past Friday. We'll talk a little bit more about Lorcana and balancing family life, jobs, and the hobbies that we have with all these other interests. I am one of your hosts, Nathaniel. I'm joined today by Ryan and Mack. Ryan and Mack, how are we doing?
What is
Good.
going on?
All right, so you guys, you had a blast on Friday. Arcasia's Island is officially live. We had a very large tournament that happened um, down in Atlanta that has very much sparked, I think, a lot of additional gas for certain cards in the last few days. What are your first impressions for Set 7? Ryan, go.
First impressions, just the way we drew it up, pretty much. We knew Happy as the Clam, in air quotes, Tamatoa was going to be talk of the town, and surely he was. We knew Belle, the apprentice and inventor, I believe is what they call her, was going to be the talk of the town, and she certainly was. Blue Steel showed out very well in a few big tournaments over the weekend on set release weekend, and I was excited to follow along. It was really impressive and entertaining to watch the biggest names in Lorcana competitive scene kind of go at it and try their hand with the new cards and come up with some new builds that were a little bit surprising as well. Not necessarily the new set 7 cards that were surprising, but one of the set 6 cards that was ultimately included was a little bit surprising to me at least. And that would be Oswald the Lucky Rabbit pulling off high roll after high roll after high roll for those big names in those big tournaments, skyrocketing TCG price for that particular card from what was it last set, $2 or $3 to now 23 or $25, just through the absolute roof. That was my biggest surprise of the weekend was seeing Oswald blow blow the lid off the cap that he had previously been living under. Mac, what are your impressions after the first weekend?
Yeah, exactly that. Tamatoa, right? I think that's ultimately been the talk of the town. Everyone's been so excited with Blue Steel, and we saw that in a lot of the opening weekend tournaments. Um, I am actually more shocked with how many big tournaments occurred this first weekend. I don't recall that happening for many of the other set releases. Maybe I'm just forgetting them, but I mean, like for example, Zan Syed, 3 Golden Mickey winner, right? Like he's in this major tournament already with a brand new set of set 7 cards, um, which also blows my mind that he had enough product for such a big tournament already. I mean, I can't imagine how many cards and boxes these guys have already opened up. But yeah, that was one big shock with me. There were already some major tournaments for Set 7 just in the first couple days of its release. But to me, it's no surprise that Sapphire seems to be at least everyone's initial first wave, first impression, or at least first tryout with Set 7, all the Sapphire cards. I'm curious to know how it builds out because I remember with Set 6, we had a lot of different moving around and trying of different card combinations. I remember one of the first couple weeks with Set 6, Maui Half Shark was used in a lot of the Amethyst Ruby first builds, and that tended to shift to pulling the Maui Half Shark out of those ultimately Set 6 Ruby Amethyst deck builds. So we'll see how things shuffle around. It's really exciting. And I don't know, more so than the last couple sets, I think we've seen a lot of excitement locally too. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit about our first weekend experience. But first impressions, yeah, I think Sapphire seems to be taking a hold of everything up to this point right now.
Nathaniel, what were your first impressions following along? It sounds like you had quite a beat on things over the weekend. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you learn?
Yeah, I think one thing that was surprising, I want to double down on your earlier point, Ryan, about how we knew that Bell would make a splash in constructed decks for Sapphire, and we had assumed that Tamatoa, of course, would also be a high value card. I think the crazy thing is that point you made earlier about Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and I want to kind of extrapolate that to just a wider view as well on some of these legendaries that seem like it's just like it's a couple cards away from being really busted, or it's just not the right fit right now, but it's a legendary, which means it's a lower pull rate, right? Which means that population of those cards will be lower. There could be value, in these sets where a card seems like it's close, but it's just not there right in this instance or in this instant. If it's going for $2, $3, $4, like why not get a playset? Why not get, if you can find several of them, what's the harm there? Because yeah, I mean the card was selling for between $2 and $6 all last month, or earlier this year, and
Right.
people are selling Oswald now for 20 to 30 a piece. I think the foils are going for close to 50. I mean, like truly explosion in value for that particular card. And for those who aren't familiar, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit is a card that says during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an item card, you may play that item for free and it enters play exerted. Otherwise, put it on the bottom of your deck. So when this card initially dropped, when set 6 came out, the idea that people had in their minds was you could play a Lucky Dime, which is a 7 cost item, for free. You're getting a ton of value out of a 2-drop character. So that was the thing that people had suggested would be amazing, but item decks just they weren't really quite there yet. And when I was thinking about set 7, Bell was the first thing on my mind because it was such an amazing early gameplay, but I didn't see just how powerful these item deck builds could be.
Hmm.
So to kind of get into some of the thing that I had observed is, with a card like Oswald, these high rolls could happen where these big name players at a larger tournament at Southside Gaming in Georgia was happening. They were playing some costly items for free with Oswald, and it rolled great. And it's kind of like an item version. Well, no, that's actually the Scrooge card, which we can get into later too. But when it hits, it's amazing, and when it doesn't, it kind of hurts. And there was a game actually where Zan Syed, who is a DLC winner and a very very highly ranked Lorcana player, he actually whiffed 9 straight Oswald triggers in a deck that had over 20 items, which is great. Like the odds of that happening are
That's
insanely low.
statistically nearly impossible. That's unreal.
Right. Like he was going out of his way at the end of the game when he like had game 2 in hand to like do all of his Oswald triggers to like see if how far this would go. And yeah, it went 9 straight triggers without getting to play an item. So, sometimes a little bit of high risk, high reward there, but I did not have that on my bingo card for such an early deck in set 7 with this big item foray, and I think it will be the early shaping of set 7's metagame in a way. Is like, how are you going to handle items, and how are you going to handle the new crab, the 6-drop crab, Tamatoa, which, to touch on your guys' earlier point about value, Mack, a week ago, you had said, hey, this card, the pre-sale pricing is set at 50, and
Yeah.
I'm seeing them on TCG Player for 65 right
I
now.
was just looking that up now, and
It
even our
went up.
local, yeah, even our local, like I saw some people selling them on like our local Facebook groups at 80% TCG, which was still $55 or something like that. It's just absolutely insane with that card right now.
Yeah. So I think that probably also sort of lends itself to another topic. I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on this because, I've only really been around the game for 3 set releases and only keenly aware of it for 2, like what that really means for card value and everything else. But Mac, you've been around this long enough to really have observed the fluctuation in value of cards and maybe what you can do to save some money in terms of chasing certain cards upon set release or being patient. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've observed over your Lorcana journey in terms of getting play sets of highly sought after cards, but maybe when you want to actually go after that.
Right. No, yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing that comes to mind for me with that has to be wait if you can. If you're looking to buy play sets of specific cards, try and wait through the 2 weeks when it goes from local game stores to having full access to all your big department or type of stores, right? Because once those types of stores are able to start selling there, the population just skyrockets and it becomes more readily available. Therefore, a higher supply means a drive down in the price. Typically, is what I've seen over the course of my Lorcana adventure. And what I've done recently over the past two sets is I haven't bought any booster box until about three, maybe even a month into when the set releases. I did that. I think I did that for Shimmering Skies, and then I definitely did it for Azurite Sea, right? So um, when once it hit that 3 week mark, once it's had time to be in department stores as well as your local game shops, and then you start seeing the prices drop online. It's a really good time, from what I've noticed, being able to purchase not only singles, but if you're into opening packs, that's when things start to level off price wise. I would
That's a good
say
point.
the one caveat to that is that as the set gets further in and the meta starts to develop, you also experience the flip side of that. People start realizing what cards are good later, and then those prices can increase. I think two examples from set six are Maui Half Shark. Everyone was really excited about Maui Half Shark, so that came out as a $25 card. But now it ended by the end of set six at a $50 card because we saw the North American Championships where that card just rolled over the competition, and then everyone wanted to try the half shark, right? And also we saw that with Calhoun. Calhoun started at a $4 or $5 card, and then once the amethyst steel metal really started to take hold, we saw that as Nathaniel is he's
Celebrating his
taking that in
set
his
champs
win.
victory again and again and again in his head.
Yeah, but that was another card that just drove up in price, right? So, um, but for the most part, the initial big expected expensive cards seem to go down after the 2 weeks when product becomes more readily available, in my experience.
I want to react to that. Calhoun, don't hate on her. You know, my gal Calhoun was my MVP in set six. She's amazing. But yeah, that is a good point that there are certain cards that once the meta sort of settles out a little bit, they tend to go up. But it does kind of feel, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but it does feel like more cards drop in value than
Yeah,
cards that will like go way up when we get that 1 month, 2 months into a particular set.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, it did happen. North American Championship did obviously have a pretty big impact on some of that as well. And it does feel like certain cards having success at major tournaments does have a very clear impact, which can kind of maybe lead us into our next topic that I wanted to talk about, which the reaction to that. So, Mac, you mentioned Maui Half Shark being a massive card at the end of set six. And Ryan had astutely observed at the end of set six that, wow, uh, Strength of a Raging Fire has gone from an $8 card suddenly to a $13 card, suddenly to an $18 card. And it's been around for a long time. I think that's a
yep,
set two
Mm-hmm.
card. And I didn't put this together, but Ryan was like, it's a direct response to Maui Half Shark.
yep,
It's a cheaper song that you can have if you have a wider board. You can sing that with a cheaper character and take out a one big threat like that. Um, and the same thing could be said about Along Came Zeus, where that didn't go up maybe quite as much, but it did also see it. I think it probably doubled in price by the end of the set. So, um, kind of that like meta shifting and meta altering cards with then like the checks that happen in response to those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Maui Half Shark is currently tent pulling the entire steel card industry, basically. with its presence, with its threat, and with its superiority and reign over the aggro deck, where the aggro deck wants to finish the game in 2 turns. But if you turn sideways and that Maui shark gets a pirate's life back, you might have to slug it out for 5 or 6 turns with repeating pirate's life after pirate's life after pirate's life. So uh, I do think that there is definitely a clear tie between easy removal and then the tent pulling of those removal cards in the value industry. Um, Looking at kind of set 7 cards, one of the other things that we kind of saw in set 6, that one of the cards that really increased in price and then actually subsequently decreased in price pretty substantially too. Genie Wish Fulfilled. I mean, it started the set 6 kind of around like what, the $8 to $10 mark, and then quickly rose up into like the $20-$30 range. And then now it's come back down. I don't know the exact price currently, but it's definitely down closer to that $10 to $15 range again, where it kind of it did a full wave pattern in the set 6 meta as people kind of got used to it, and then started teching against it and realized like, yeah, there's a lot of removal options for this. Maybe I want something else in my deck. It feels bad to play this on turn 4 and then to not actually have a turn 4 happen because they just remove it on their turn for 3 cost. Or yeah, 3 cost pretty much is the bottom of that removal bin for Genie as well. And there's a handful of options out there, like a Ice Block plus a Sisu. Ice Block probably already being on the field. You have Brawl for 3 in red decks. You have Strength of the Raging Fire, also, as Nathaniel just previously mentioned. Along Came Zeus. Again, Nathaniel already mentioned that one. There's a handful of options to deal with Genie. Um, what of the set 7 cards do y'all think are going to wave pattern like that, or is there something else on the mind that you think is kind of lurking in the background, kind of speculating on what set 7 cards might actually turn into being prized possessions in a few weeks' time?
So I want to touch on that because I think if we are in a blue meta, that there's a lot of Sapphire decks, and a big portion of that is indeed items, and Tamatoa is a big part of those builds in terms of bringing back items and then being able to play those items or play different items for free, right? Like interacting with your discard pile of items. I still hold that I think the purple 4 cost Queen legendary from this set, people I think originally were kind of like, very meh about it, but I do think that being able to push those item cards from someone's discard into their deck really helps limit the damage that a Tamatoa could have if it comes down a turn or two after you play that queen, because it is only a 4-drop and it is inkable. So I still think that card could have some play in some Amethyst builds. We'll see, but you can get a fair amount of value out of it in terms of just getting lore off of it, but also I think being able to push those discard items away could be very valuable, and they could also be valuable in the red-blue matchup in terms of pushing actions away, prevent some of the
That's a
damage
good
from
point.
Maui.
It's a very good point. And with both of those decks, anything that's Sapphire these days, that bell, the 3 cost bell, that is, the turn 1 play basically, counts as a princess card, right? So then, therefore, you have a 4 lore exert function by choosing 2 items in Bell or 2 actions in Bell, and shuffling those back in or putting them on the bottom of the opponent's deck. So there's a little bit of bonus support there for that Queen card. That's a good point. Mac, what do you have on your radar?
In terms of like potentially getting overhyped and then going back down, I'm really looking at this Donald Duck Flustered Sorcerer, the one that increases your opponent's win total to 25 lore.
Hmm.
I just think I think so many people were originally excited for it. Wow, you can push your opponent, and that gives you a chance to really get back into the game. But with the amount of removal prevalent in the game, I just don't see a world where it's not going to be ultimately easy to remove a character like this. The only thing that it has going for it that I will admit here is its 6 willpower, because most of the direct removal, besides something like a Maleficent Dragon, right, that can just banish any character, most of the direct removal tends to be maxed out at 5. So you'll at least have a turn or two with this Donald on the field, I imagine. I just think people are going to start to realize how relatively easy it will be to remove big willpower characters such as this one, especially with things like Sapphire Coil, right? If you're in item deck and you have two of them on the field, you're immediately within that threshold of a little Sisu or a Brawl, right? So I'm curious to see where that goes in terms of going up, going down. What about your thoughts, guys? I also have some thoughts on like cards that I think are sleepers, but maybe we'll get in that until the next question here.
I think a big to build on that, Mac. I think a big reason why that card might find it tough to take a foothold in the game is it's a 7 cost, right, and it's uninkable.
Yes.
So
A
like
very valuable slot that it would be taking up in a card in a deck list.
correct, like it's if you get that in your card, there are certain matchups where it's a dead card and it's expensive to actually play, and it's just that feels really bad. And I think your uninkables, you have to just be so judicious about what you're going to include. And I just don't know if it provides quite enough juice across several different ink combinations that you're going to run into to be valuable. Could be wrong, but I think you're right that it's an exciting mechanic, but maybe we need to see something a little different or some other card to come out, like we mentioned earlier with like Oswald, where then it allows Donald to go better. And maybe that's, maybe that's like a blue green where you play the 5 cost action, and you get to play Donald out on turn 5.
Right.
But then your opponent could play a Maldragon and kill it right away.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Or just
banish it.
run Dragon Fires or the new 7 cost Inkable one to for removal. I think the
Yeah.
other one off the top of the head that would remove it very easily, that could be easily included in an aggro deck, would be World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I mean, right, a lot of the Amber lists or aggro lists, it's a 2 cost song that would remove this 7 cost uninkable threat, if you will, or stall tactic, where they just quest to 21 and then sing World's Greatest and the game's over. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't see that one really coming into the meta very strongly, but I'm interested to see where it goes. I think it does have, depending where the meta goes, I suppose. If it becomes a little bit more of a mid-range meta, I think that card becomes very strong. But I think in a very uh, um, contrasting aggro versus control meta, I don't know where that Donald Duck really has a home truly.
Yeah. It does feel like we're continuing to see more and more cards where if, and again, Oswald is not this, but many cards, a lot of the value is getting some sort of an effect on play, and like Donald sort of has that, but like if you remove it, like it's the impact it had in the game is now just gone. Versus like other cards, like if somebody throws a Hiram down, right, and they banish the item, if I remove the Hiram, I'm clearing the future damage, but it's already done quite a bit of work for you. It's already drawn you 2 cards. So I
And burn
think
resources.
right. So it's like I think we're seeing that oftentimes right now there's such a premium on play effects versus I have to quest or exert or do something later, or the impact of the card has to wait a little while to really be effective. Um, I think that's just not quite as valuable. And I'm saying that again as even Tamatoa, but like Tamatoa, you get the value when you play it and when you quest.
Right.
Good
What are
point.
your
Good
guys'
point.
sleepers? I mean, I got 4 off the top of my head if you want me to go first before I'll give you guys a chance to think about it. So I'm
Yeah, go
really
for it.
curious where Ink Geyser and the Return of Hercules come into this set. I think
Hmm.
those are 2 cards where I think it'll take a little bit of people thinking outside of the box. I envision them more as tech cards in random 1 or 2 twofers when it comes to putting it in someone's deck. Um, but I know we've had some streams throughout the first weekend that we've been able to observe, especially with Ink Geyser, on how that will be applied and played. but I'm curious to see how those merged in because those were two cards I think there was a lot of original excitement for. Right now they're relatively cheap, so if again going back to our previous conversation of maybe cards that come up in the future, I can see these being ones that may become popular later down the road as well. So maybe pick up your play sets now. I'm also curious to see where I still haven't been able to figure out this Mickey Mouse inspirational warrior. um, I think there's so much potential for this, but if you don't apply his ability like the next turn, he'll just simply get removed. I think with like let the storm rage on or brawl or things of that nature. So I'd be curious to see how people are find a way to make that work. But I've been more and more excited over the past couple days about Bagheera. This what is it, Bagheera Guardian Jaguar. I just think a character, grab your swords, and it's also a 5 cost, so you can then sing grab your swords to potentially do 4 damage across the board. I think this is just the more and more I think about it, is just a crazy combination, and I'm excited to see where that card goes. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a few. So I put a decent amount of thought into this prior to set release after we were getting all the before we had all the or after we had all the cards released and before the set actually dropped. I put a decent amount of thought into figuring out like rares, super rares is kind of where I was focused on of what of those cards are going to, potentially be the ones that you want to pick up a playset in the first week because after a few events come out and after the meta settles out, like those are going to be hot, sought after cards. So first one on my list is Restoring the Crown. Amethyst Steel 6-drop uninkable. It's an action that reads exert all opposing characters. Whenever one of your characters banishes another character in a challenge this turn, gain 2 lore. I think this is an incredible stalemate breaker for any mirror matchup, whether it's Amethyst Steel versus Sapphire Steel or Amethyst Steel versus Emerald Steel. If you're able to find a way to get a Restoring the Crown down, then as an Amethyst Steel player, you that could potentially win games for you. I mean, it likely will. If it gets down, it's going to be a game-winning play. Basically, is a way that it's designed to be. Because if they have any warded characters on the other side of the field that are just standing up, if they have anything like Oswald on the field that they're not questing with because they just want the aura effect, there's a handful of those effects in the steel other steel decks that Amethyst Steel has a chance to then force the exert and force the removal of. And the major way for Amethyst removal is board control, and so they likely would have lot more characters on board than the opponent, and then dropping this and swinging into everything to gain that lore. You're probably gaining at least 4 lore a turn on that, but also then more importantly, you're taking full board control for that turn. The other one in that steel realm, I think, is also Restoring Atlantis. A similar effect. It's a 5 cost uninkable. Um, and the card is an action that reads your characters cannot be challenged until the start of your next turn. Kind of on the same vein as Restoring Atlantis, where you're creating this gap for you to aggressively quest out. So something like a blue steel, the low to the ground aggro deck might find a way for this one to work its way in. To be that finisher where I'm 2 turns away, they have a Maui Shark on board, or they have a wider board than me, but I have like 3 characters that can quest for 6. So if I'm at 8 lore, I quest out to 14, play Restoring Atlantis, and they're on a clock. They have to either find um, non-challenge based removal, so find a song or something like that to play, or they need to be able to finish the game on their turn, which if you're playing this card and you're creating that gap for yourself, like you've calculated out that they're not going to be able to finish that. So I think those two are the top of my list. I like Bagheera because it is grab your swords with legs. But just below that, number 199 in the set, Gantu, the Experienced Enforcer, is the third one that I'll talk about here. So it's a 4 cost, uninkable, 2/4 character stat line, 1 lore. But more importantly, its first effect is when you play this characters cannot exert to sing songs until the start of your next turn. So it shuts down all steel song approaches. So you can't use songs as removal unless you hardcast them, which if the opponent is hardcasting a song as a steel deck, you feel like you already won. And then the second ability, which, tell me why a 4 cost card needs 2 unreal abilities. The second one is each player pays 2 more ink to play actions or items while this character's on the field. So That's actions or items, importantly. And now we're in this item meta, so your popsicle all of a sudden is 3 ink to draw a card. Your dime is now 9 ink to play, so you're throwing off these ink curves for people, and if they're not able to get through that Gantu, which they're likely going to spend at least 2 ink to get through the Gantu, and then in order to play those actions or items for the cost that they're printed at. So I think those are the three that I'll highlight here. There's a handful more that I've pulled out, but I just want to cede the floor to Nathaniel and get his thoughts after Mac has a thought here too.
Yeah, yeah. Let me step in here. You bring up a good point about Gantu and going back to one of our previous conversations about what happened to Genie Wish Fulfilled. Uh, I think this is that card, like the big roller coaster. Now that I'm thinking about it, like two unreal abilities. But what I've loved about Lorcana is that it seems to be super well balanced. It's
Hmm.
uninkable card, and it's only a 2/4 stat line, so it's relatively simple to remove. But to be fair, in order to play a brawl, you have to pay 5 for it now. So I guess that's the balance with it. But I'm this is one where I'm curious to see where it goes and how the meta shifts and develops to be able to remove this card exactly as to what happened with Genie Wish Fulfilled. So that's
It's
kind
a
of
good
what
point.
my 2 cents on that one is.
Nathaniel, what cards are you eyeing for potentially being these speculative impact cards?
I'll go with some little sleepers here that I think could end up making a pretty good impact. So I'll start with kind of towards the bottom with just a common, and it's the one drop Mulan. When you play this character, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. I had spoken on maybe just our most recent pod, but I talked about how Ruby Steel tends to struggle with card draw. This is at least card filtering, and I think that that is a big upgrade for that deck to at least be able to sift through the deck a little bit more to look for some outs during some of those challenging, um, whatever phase of the game you're in, right? So I think that's and it's a one drop. It's also a shift target for the new red. Is it the Ruby Steel Mulan?
Yep.
Um,
Hmm.
so I think there's a lot of value there. Um, So that I think that's one. The other one I talked about you guys right as we were starting this tonight is the Faju, and that is a rare. Whenever one of your characters challenges another character, if it's the second challenge this turn, gain 3 lore. Um, Ruby Steel wants to do challenging and lots of it. This feels like a card that could certainly help you in the lore race for that one. The only other one I can think of that you guys haven't already talked about is um, the Bolt, the dual ink
Mm.
amber steel bolt. It's a super rare. Um, it's 84 cents right now, and it's a shift 3. Whenever you ready this character, gain 1 lore for each other undamaged character you have in play, and then you can exert it and you can banish a chosen illusion character. So a check against some of the purple stuff. But I think the fact that it quests for 2, it's a 3/5 body. You get out on turn 3, and whenever you're reading it with undamaged characters on the field, um, you're just getting bonus lore. This feels to me like a card that could slot in to like the set 7 diggy hole type build, where you're kind of going gas pedal, throwing lots of characters onto the board. Um, I could see this card making its way into that amber steel aggro type list. So I think that could be, and it's a super rare, so that like that could definitely impact the pricing, where maybe if it does make a splash, it's suddenly a $4 or $5 card instead of just 80 cents. Um, so yeah, get out there, get your play sets for $3.
Yeah. I will say with that card, during our set 7 sealed release event that Ryan and I attended, I pulled a little bolt and a big bolt in my 6 packs. I did was able to work the shift twice in 2 separate games. It did work out really nice. But after playing that set sealed event, as well as kind of doing some research over the course of the weekend and into earlier this week, um, I tend to fall into the same that most of the public seems to have on that card is that unless you get that shift line, it seems like a little bit of a useless card because then you're
Mhm.
waiting on turn 6 to even just quest for it and trigger its readying ability. So so yeah, definitely if you're I think the community sentiment on that card is you have to play the shift to really get a strong advantage with that card. That's just something I'm seeing as well, but you never know, right? That the Diggy Hold kind of came out of nowhere towards the middle and end of that of set 6, and maybe that's a nice little tech card to shift into the to implement into that type of style deck as well. So we'll see what that ends up.
Yeah, and speaking of that shift line, I mean, it could be an awesome sequence for you if you can land it right. And sometimes it's a
Yeah,
dubious proposition with these shifts. I will say both the 2-drop bolt and the 5 cost shift 3 are inkable. So if you don't have the shift line, you can always ink it. But the 2-drop steel one is whenever this character quests, if he has no damage, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. Um, so depending on where you're at, if you do have that first, you could actually take the one less questing, right, and do some card filtering, and then have him, and then shift after you've done that. So then when you ready up on the next turn, on turn 4, you would get the benefit of the other characters. Suffice to say, well, we definitely will see, and I think you bring up a good point, and I do actually want to use the opportunity because you mentioned it now, Mac. Y'all went Mac. That was your first sealed Rip
it
six
was.
packs, make a 40 card deck experience. Ryan, that was your second. I'd love to hear your perspective because from a Twin Cities of Minneapolis perspective, that event was a banger in terms of just the volume of people, the level of the players that were there. Um, Pretty exciting and large crowd for our purposes.
Yeah, I'll speak to the crowd first, and then we'll get into I think my personal experience. The crowd was fantastic. For those who are local to the Twin Cities of Minnesota, or even maybe listening externally, who knows? Maybe we have a giant audience up at this point, right? Episode 4, let's go. But no, our local community, we tend to know who the big players are. And the biggest one by far is Scott Markinson, who took second place at North American Championships, right? But at that sealed event, there were 44 players, which is huge. I would say an average really good turnout in the Twin Cities, just local event or even set champions. Let's use that as an example. A good turnout tends to be just south of 30 people. So in that 25 to 30, and the most common tends to be anywhere from 15 to 25 people for a set championship. So the fact that we had a sealed event, 44 people, what was absolutely insane. Did not expect to have that many people show up when we went. But of that crowd, I would say at least 5 of the top 10 local Twin Cities players attended this event. So, as someone who is definitely not in that category, it was really exciting to just watch some of these really competitive, like pro style players. I see how they operate when it comes to thinking about how to work a deck and how they go about thinking using the cards in different situations. So that was really fun. But in terms of my own experience, um, I will say this set 5 champion was a sheer disappointment. I went 0 and 6 in all of my games. I did
Oh
not
no.
pull any really good cards when it comes to a sealed event. But I overall the experience was really fun. I mean, all the people are very lovely. We have a really nice community in the Twin Cities. I'm glad I did it, and I will definitely do it again. Hopefully, with at least one victory under my belt. But yeah, overall, it was a fantastic experience. It was a good, from a cost perspective, we got a lot for the amount that we bought into the tournament. So yeah, overall, it was a really fun experience, and I can't wait to see to attend some more in the future. Ryan, what were your experiences like with that last Friday?
Yeah, I mean, I had a little bit, getting into the Minnesota Lorcana scene, a little bit of like starstruckness, I suppose, if you can call it that. Just like being in the same room of 44 people. One, that's a lot of people. Two, um, a handful of the biggest names in Minnesota Lorcana community were all in the same room playing against each other or next to each other in their sealed event decks, and it was really cool. I had a good time. I ended up fortunately getting one win. I actually had a rematch with one of the people that I had played in a constructed event for set champs in Monticello, which was cool. It's cool to see them again. Saw a couple of people we saw at the source, just trying to like get into the community and keep those connections. Um, and then I actually got to meet one of Nathaniel's friends and one of those people that I think I count at least in one of the biggest names in the Minnesota Lorcana community with our friend Ernie. Got to play against him, and boy did he have a good deck, and he can construct a good deck. But that was fun, and I had a good time. I loved a sealed event because it definitely puts everybody in attendance on the same playing field in terms of pre-preparation, preparation for the event, and you don't really have a constructed deck that you're coming in with, so it's not necessarily how accessible the cards have been to you. It's just what you ever get, whatever you get on that night is what you're playing with. Sometimes you get some great synergies, and sometimes, as Mac found out, you don't get lucky at all. You might have some good cards that you rip that you're excited about, but maybe they're not sealed event relevant because they're not as impactful as you want them to be. And it's really easy in deck building in that situation to kind of go multiple different directions. So keeping a focus on what you want your deck to do for you during those games is also a fun little it's a fun little piece that not you don't really get a whole lot of experience with in like a set champs event or environment. So I'd love a sealed event. I would definitely go back and do another sealed event another time. It's probably one of my favorite formats for going out in the community and doing events, other than set champs, obviously, because that's just fun, competing against other people with the decks that we have. But yeah, I had a good time. Came away with one win, met some cool people, and saw some really cool play happening. But yeah, Nathaniel, were you really sad that you missed out since you were at home, or what was your feeling on the Set 7 release?
Yeah, so I wanted to just be able to experience a taste of the release event hype. So I did actually bring my little guys into the store just to say hello, buy a trove, say hi to everyone, and just see everybody at the event, which was really cool. My polls were terrible, so that wasn't great, but it was really neat to see that many players and that level of players all together in one spot. It did feel like the place to be on a release night. Um, and I think like the part that I am sad I didn't get to hang out with you guys, but also I think, like I said on the earlier pod, these unique release events with sealed cards, it is I think such a mentally gratifying experience to build a deck from scratch where you can use all the colors and try to find some synergy, and it's totally random. You get your 72 cards and you got to try to find 40 that kind of work. Um, I think that's really cool, and it feels like something that you really only get to do a lot of in the early stages of a set release, unless you take some of your own initiative with a group and sort of plan something out on your own, um, which we've kind of done. Some fun events, which we can definitely talk about in our next pod with some different formats to sort of keep introducing some additional spice to your games. Um, but with that, I think we're just about at time. Um, we hope you found this as exciting to talk about. We are obviously very hyped up about Set 7, Archasia's Island. It's been cool to see the game transform. And guys, I think we will sign off and just say let's get the duck out of here. Until the next one.
Thanks. Bye now.